Leopold and Loeb, The Perfect Crime, Bobby Franks, Nathan Leopold, Richard Loeb, Chicago Anytime Farvar, True Crime, True Crime Documentary, American Crime History, Famous Murder Cases, Criminal Psychology, Perfect Murder, Kidnapping Case, Real Crime Stories, Clarence Darrow, Chicago Murder, Crime Investigation, Historical Crimes. Welcome to Final Trace. Here we don't tell stories the way they're usually told. We follow the details that changed everything. True stories, mysterious events, and unforgettable facts that left a lasting mark. Let's begin. Could two brilliant young men commit the perfect murder and disappear without leaving a single trace? In Chicago in 1924, two wealthy college students believed they were smarter than the police, smarter than the courts, and smarter than everyone else. They didn't kill for money. They didn't kill for revenge. They didn't even kill out of hatred. They wanted to prove that the perfect crime was possible, but history would remember them for a very different reason. Because sometimes the smallest mistake is enough to destroy the greatest plan ever created. The first young man was Nathan Leopold, born in 1905. From an early age, he was recognized as a child prodigy. He entered university at only 15 years old and graduated before reaching the age of 20. Some historical sources claim he could speak 27 languages, while others state he mastered at least 5 fluently. His IQ was reportedly estimated at over 210, making him one of the most intelligent young men of his generation. Yet despite his extraordinary mind, he struggled to connect with other people. He believed he was intellectually superior to almost everyone around him. As the years passed, he became fascinated by the writings of the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, especially the controversial idea of the Übermensch, a person who considers himself above ordinary morality, above society, and even above the law. For Leopold, these ideas were no longer philosophy. They became his way of life. The second young man was Richard Loeb, born in 1904 into another wealthy Chicago family. He was intelligent, handsome, confident, and admired by almost everyone who knew him. On the surface, he appeared to have the perfect life. But behind that image was a much darker personality. Since childhood, he enjoyed breaking rules. He stole, not because he needed money, but because he loved the thrill of getting away with it. He vandalized property. He set fires, not for profit, but simply for excitement. To Richard Loeb, crime wasn't a necessity, it was entertainment. When Leopold and Loeb met at university, their friendship developed quickly. Each found something he admired in the other. Leopold admired Loeb's confidence and charisma. Loeb admired Leopold's intelligence and absolute loyalty. Together, they began committing small crimes, shoplifting, vandalism, arson. Each successful crime made them believe they were untouchable. Eventually, those petty crimes were no longer enough. They became convinced they were smarter than every detective, every police officer, and every judge who might one day investigate them. That belief gave birth to one dangerous idea: the perfect crime, a murder planned so carefully that no one would ever solve it. For months, they planned every detail. Nothing was left to chance. They would rent a car using a false name, kidnap the child of a wealthy family, kill him the very same day, hide the body outside Chicago, then demand a ransom for a victim who was already dead. To them, it was the ultimate challenge: kidnapping, murder, extortion, without leaving behind a single clue. They truly believed the police would never discover who they were. But neither of them realized that even the most perfect plan can be destroyed by one tiny mistake. To be continued. On the morning of May 21st, 1924, the plan they had spent months preparing was finally put into motion. Using a false name, Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb rented a car, then drove through the wealthy neighborhoods of Chicago, searching for the perfect victim. They weren't looking for anyone specific, they simply waited for the right opportunity. Hours passed, then they saw a young boy leaving school. His name was Bobby Franks. He was only 14 years old. But Bobby wasn't just another schoolboy. He was the son of wealthy businessman Jacob Franks, and tragically, he was also Richard Loeb's cousin. That was exactly why he never felt threatened when the car pulled up beside him. Richard smiled, opened the passenger door, and said, "Hop in, we'll give you a ride home." Bobby had known Richard for years. Without the slightest suspicion, he stepped into the car. He had no idea that it would be the last ride of his life. Only a few minutes later, the car had left the crowded streets behind. Then, without warning, Bobby was struck on the head with a heavy metal chisel. To this day, historians still cannot say with certainty which of the two men delivered the first blow. Each blamed the other. Leopold claimed he was driving, while Loeb attacked Bobby. Loeb insisted that Leopold was the killer. The truth has never been established, but one fact is beyond dispute. Bobby was no longer able to defend himself. The car stopped in a secluded area. There, the two young men strangled him until they were certain he was dead. Then they calmly moved to the next stage of their carefully planned operation. They removed his clothes, they tore them into pieces, then scattered them across different locations, hoping to eliminate every possible clue. As if that wasn't enough, they poured acid over Bobby's face to make identification as difficult as possible. Every step had been planned. Every detail had been discussed for months. Nothing was left to chance. But what happened next was even more disturbing than the murder itself. Instead of disposing of the body immediately, they stopped at a restaurant. They ordered lunch, sat inside the car, and calmly ate while Bobby's body lay beneath their feet. When they finished, they drove outside Chicago and abandoned the body inside a roadside drainage culvert. Then they calmly returned to the city. They carefully cleaned the car, removed every trace of blood, and returned it to the rental company as if nothing had ever happened. In their minds, the first stage of the perfect crime had been completed. Now, only one step remained: collect the ransom money. That evening, one of them called the Franks family from a public telephone. Bobby's mother, Flora Franks, answered the call. The voice on the other end spoke calmly. "We have your son. If you ever want to see him alive again, you'll follow our instructions." His mother was devastated. Meanwhile, the rest of the family searched desperately across Chicago. The following morning, a ransom letter arrived. The kidnappers demanded $10,000. At the time, it was an enormous fortune, equivalent to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today, they even specified exactly how the money had to be delivered. Every bill had to be a $20 bill. The cash had to be placed inside a sealed cigar box. Then Bobby's father was instructed to wait beside a specific public telephone for the final directions. It seemed like a flawless plan, almost impossible to trace. But while the two killers waited confidently for the final stage to begin, someone else, just a few miles away, made a discovery that neither of them could have imagined. A child's body had been found inside a drainage culvert, and at that very moment, their so called perfect crime quietly began to fall apart. To be continued. Hours after carrying out the murder, Leopold and Loeb waited beside a public telephone, expecting Bobby's father to call back so they could move forward with the ransom plan. But the phone never rang. They called once, then twice, then a third time. Still, no answer. Slowly, an uneasy feeling began to settle in. What they didn't know was that everything had already changed. On the morning of May 22nd, 1924, a farmer made a horrifying discovery. Inside a roadside drainage culvert just outside Chicago, he found the body of a young boy. He immediately contacted the police. At first, the victim's identity remained unknown. But after checking recent missing person reports, investigators found only one matching case, a 14-year-old boy who had disappeared the previous day. His name was Bobby Franks. His family was called to the morgue. There, their worst nightmare became reality. The body belonged to Bobby. And just like that, the ransom plot was over before it had even begun. Leopold and Loeb didn't learn that the body had been discovered until the story appeared in the newspapers. Surprisingly, they remained confident. They believed the police would never identify them. They had rented the car under a false name, destroyed the typewriter used to write the ransom letter, buried its broken parts, and convinced themselves they had erased every possible clue. But they were wrong. Near the crime scene, investigators found a single pair of eyeglasses. At first, the discovery didn't seem important. Thousands of people wore glasses. But one optical expert noticed something unusual. The frame was extremely rare. Only a small number had ever been manufactured. When detectives checked the sales records, they made an astonishing discovery. Only 3 people in the entire area had purchased that exact model. One of them was Nathan Leopold. Leopold was brought in for questioning. Detectives asked a simple question: "How did you lose your glasses?" He calmly replied that he had been birdwatching near the area and believed he accidentally dropped them. At first, his explanation seemed believable, but investigators weren't convinced. Then they asked where he had been on the night of the murder. He claimed he had spent the evening with Richard Loeb. So the police questioned Loeb separately. Almost immediately, their stories began to contradict one another. Every interview created more inconsistencies, and under increasing pressure, their carefully constructed lie collapsed. Loeb confessed to taking part in the crime, but blamed Leopold for killing Bobby. Leopold confessed as well, but pointed the finger right back at Loeb. Even today, historians still cannot say with certainty which one delivered the fatal blow. Case quickly became known as the trial of the century. Across America, people expected one outcome, the death penalty, but both families hired the legendary defense attorney Clarence Darrow, already famous for opposing capital punishment. Darrow delivered one of the most remarkable closing arguments in American legal history. He urged the court to consider their youth, their psychological condition, and the consequences of execution. His argument changed everything. Instead of death, the judge sentenced both men to life imprisonment. Richard Loeb would never leave prison alive. In 1936, he was killed during an altercation with another inmate. Nathan Leopold served 33 years behind bars before being released in 1958. He later moved to Puerto Rico, where he worked as a mathematics teacher. He also wrote a book about birds, a lifelong passion he had carried since childhood. In 1971, he died of a heart attack. But the story didn't end there. Even today, the case of Leopold and Loeb is studied in law schools, psychology departments, and criminology programs around the world because it proved that murder isn't always driven by money, revenge, or desperation. Sometimes the motive is arrogance, the desire to prove superiority, or simply the thrill of committing the impossible. Most importantly, this case left behind one unforgettable lesson. There is no such thing as the perfect crime. No matter how carefully a criminal plans, one small mistake is often enough to reveal the truth. And in this case, it wasn't a confession. It wasn't an eyewitness. It wasn't a hidden fingerprint. It was a single pair of eyeglasses left behind at the crime scene. One tiny mistake that destroyed the perfect crime forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next investigation. We'll see you in another true story. Stranger, darker, and even more unbelievable. Until next time.